Hello, one of followers and subscribers of Holy Ghost, and I hope this video finds you well. Very quickly, as a result of the threat of the US, general to Africa, as a result of the threat to Captain Ibrahim Traore, the president of Burkina Faso, a couple of days ago or weeks ago, the president of North Korea, I'm sure most of you know him, he has vowed to protect Captain Ibrahim Traore and Burkina Faso. Now, guys, recall the person I know, the current president of America, Donald Trump, is someone that don't like war, don't like fight. If you remember, when Zelensky was in White House recently, he made a statement telling him that you are gambling with Third World War. So they know this guy, this president of Korea. The guy is full of ruggedity, audacity. You understand? He's fearless. So it's not someone the US want to mess with. They know that it's going to, if they do that, it will be messy. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm glad that the person of this man is coming for Africa. Also, it is not very clear to me now that indeed the US, the state, the West, especially the US, they are our number one enemy in Africa and especially Nigeria. Why am I saying this? How come this element, when they announced that they were going to release the document of Pablo Escobar on the 3rd of May, we were excited. Internet was agog. Do you understand? We were excited. Many say you should stop excitement. They may not release. They have been promising. When are they going to release? Don't be excited. Don't be carried away. I argue with them, but that is clear. Only for them to release one silly statement I saw online that they can no longer release it until 3 months' time. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? When they made the first statement, some said that, please, I'm going to show you the video, okay, of the Burkina Faso and the president of Korea. Let me just finish this fast. So, many may say that, no, what's it called? Negotiation is going to be going on, you understand? So they will release it, which has proven, they've been proven right. This was when they did it 2023, they did it 2024, now again. What did they probably spoke? So they want to go behind that to negotiate Pablo Escobar, and you understand, saying that new negotiation at the detriment of our citizen, and now be playing us like gamble. Please, for our enemy, what's your take? Please, as you watch this video now, please help me give a thumbs up and please share. It's quite interesting. Watch to the end. Thanks and God bless you.
Landlocked African nation formed an alliance with one of the most isolated governments in the world, tipping the scales in an already unstable region. Burkina Faso's re-established diplomatic ties with North Korea present important issues of sovereignty, military might, and the struggle for independence in a world where international alliances have the power to create or break nations. This audacious action, spearheaded by Ibrahim Traore, the leader of Burkina Faso, marks a radical change in the country's foreign policy, one that rejects Western influence and aims to forge a new future via military cooperation. The full ramifications of this partnership are still unknown as Burkina Faso negotiates the unpredictable world political landscape. However, one thing is evident. It's more than just a show of support. It's revolutionary. But why is Burkina Faso of interest to North Korea? A modest but important diplomatic move in March 2023 garnered international and African attention. Burkina Faso declared that diplomatic ties with North Korea would be restored. There was more to this surprising declaration than a mere political formality. Ibrahim Traore's administration made a bold move that marked a change in Burkina Faso's foreign policy. This move sparked criticism and raised eyebrows in the West for a government that had cut off relations with Pyongyang in 2017 because of international sanctions. Why would Burkina Faso decide to re-establish ties with one of the most isolated and contentious regimes in the world at this time, when it is already dealing with a number of internal and external issues? We must comprehend the larger background of Burkina Faso's location in a geopolitically unstable area, as well as the key elements affecting Traore's approach in order to respond to this question. The Sahel region of West Africa has long been a hotbed of insurgency, with extremist organizations gaining ground in a number of nations, including Burkina Faso. Having inherited a country at war with extremist organizations, Traore, who came to power in a military coup in 2022, found it difficult to hold onto power. Burkina Faso had few practical options because of this security void, mounting Western pressure, and the absence of significant backing from long-standing allies. African leaders are now looking for alternate strategies to protect their security and sovereignty as a result of the West's emphasis on military operations in the area, which are frequently condemned for their inefficiency and unfavorable results. Restoring relations with North Korea was therefore more than just a show of defiance. It was a well-thought-out reaction to the urgent security requirements of Burkina Faso. Notwithstanding its isolation and the severity of international sanctions, North Korea has a long history of offering military aid to nations in need of defensive support. This has involved providing many countries, especially those attempting to stave off Western influence, with weapons, training, and military know-how. North Korea provided a chance for Traore, who sought to bolster Burkina Faso's defenses against armed insurgents and establish his authority. In light of Burkina Faso's growing security concerns, the restoration of diplomatic relations made it possible to obtain military hardware, including weapons, training, and possibly even strategic counsel. Another obvious sign of Burkina Faso's wish to escape the sway of established Western powers is its decision to turn to North Korea. Burkina Faso's sovereignty had frequently felt threatened in an area ruled by former colonial powers like France, and with the United States gaining power through aid and military partnerships. With a primary focus on counterinsurgency operations and foreign military presence, the West's approach to African security has frequently prioritized strategic goals over the actual welfare of the populace. By restoring ties with Pyongyang, Traore's administration is making a statement. Burkina Faso is determined to avoid becoming entangled in the web of Western interests. The collaboration with North Korea is a component of a larger plan to lessen Burkina Faso's need on Western assistance and diversify its international partnerships. Furthermore, Traore wasn't alone in his determination to re-establish relations with North Korea. The leader's action demonstrated a deep-seated desire to secure the nation's survival and autonomy in the face of escalating domestic turmoil and regional instability. An encouraging example of resistance was provided by North Korea, which has managed to preserve its sovereignty in the face of decades of international isolation and sanctions. It showed how a nation might handle international politics without caving in to outside pressure, and Traore probably found this tenacity appealing. Joining forces with a country like North Korea, which has a strong military posture and a history of offering military support, looked like a sensible move to bolster Burkina Faso's defenses given the threat to its territorial integrity. Traore was ready to take on such issues, even though the Western media swiftly characterized the diplomatic thaw as a step that would further isolate Burkina Faso. Burkina Faso's leadership appeared to be growing more and more irritated with the failure of previous partnerships, and the nation's need on foreign money and Western military support has decreased in recent years. By forming an alliance with North Korea, Burkina Faso demonstrated its independence and refused to let outside forces dictate its security, re-establishing diplomatic ties with Pyongyang. Although the move was risky, Traore made sure Burkina Faso had at least one partner ready to provide useful, non-judgmental support for its security needs. Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's proceed. Further economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation from Western countries could result from engaging with North Korea. However, the costs of sanctions might have seemed insignificant in comparison to the obvious advantages of military backing for a nation already dealing with internal strife and an unrelenting insurgency. The leaders of Burkina Faso were aware that they were risking their standing in the international community, but they could not afford to lose. For them, The state's continued existence and the defense of its citizens against the escalating prospect of insurrection constituted the true risk. In that regard, more valuable than any diplomatic repercussions was the possibility of military collaboration with North Korea. Burkina Faso's changing relationship with the international world was also reflected in the re-establishment of links. It is important to remember that this realignment with North Korea occurred at a period when African nations were generally growing more assertive in their foreign policy, even though the West may have denounced the action. Traore and Burkina Faso sent a strong message. Without being forced to adopt Western political structures or principles, African countries ought to be free to choose their allies and pursue what is best for their sovereignty. In summary, repairing diplomatic relations between Burkina Faso and North Korea involves more than a simple political ploy. It is an indication of Burkina Faso's resolve to safeguard its future. Traore is putting Burkina Faso in a position to become more autonomous by enlisting North Korea's assistance. Additionally, the ruling directly challenges the established power structures in Africa and the global community. The partnership with North Korea might be a lifeline and a sign of defiance as the situation in Burkina Faso develops, opening the door for a new era in the nation's history. The advantages of Burkina Faso's association with North Korea, however, are very obvious and include military assistance, cutting-edge technology, and the opportunity to break away from Western influence. What North Korea stands to gain by backing Ibrahim Traore's regime in Burkina Faso is still an open subject. Alliances are rarely one-sided in the intricate realm of international affairs. The relationship between Burkina Faso and North Korea includes more than just military support. This strategic alliance supports Pyongyang's larger geopolitical objectives and provides a number of important advantages. First, it's critical to recognize that North Korea is a very isolated state that is subject to the most severe sanctions enforced by the US, the EU, and the UN. Maintaining strong alliances and engaging in traditional commercial interactions have become more challenging for the nation due to its economic and diplomatic isolation. But for a long time, North Korea has depended on unorthodox partnerships with nations that are likewise isolated or attempting to overthrow Western authority. The ideal partner in this situation is Burkina Faso, which Pyongyang finds appealing as it is not only open to interacting with North Korea, but also stands to benefit greatly from it. The chance to increase its diplomatic clout on the African continent is among the biggest advantages of North Korea's backing of Traore. Africa has long been a region of interest for superpowers like China, the US, and the EU due to its abundance of resources and advantageous location. North Korea can establish a foothold in an area where it has traditionally had little involvement by developing deeper connections with an African country like Burkina Faso. Although individual African nations and the African Union, AU, have generally maintained a neutral or even benevolent stance toward North Korea, the AU's relationship with Burkina Faso suggests that North Korea is not as isolated as it may seem. By backing Burkina Faso, North Korea is able to offset the diplomatic pressure from Western nations. It goes beyond simply giving Burkina Faso technological or military support. The goal is to form partnerships that will assist North Korea in navigating a world that is increasingly considering it to be a rogue state. By providing Burkina Faso with assistance, by proving that it still has allies who are prepared to support it, despite their relative insignificance on the international scene, North Korea solidifies its place in the global geopolitical arena. Aside from that, North Korea has a large and sophisticated military-industrial complex that is focused on creating a variety of weapons, including small guns, missile systems, and cyber warfare technologies. Even though sanctions have limited its economy, the nation nevertheless has a sizable military production capability, which it has attempted to use through exports, frequently to nations that are similarly economically or politically isolated to itself. Pyongyang can now transfer military hardware to a country that desperately needs weapons and technology to combat the insurrection threatening its borders, thanks to Burkina Faso's decision to re-establish diplomatic ties with North Korea. Regarding North Korea, potentially profitable, the arms trade with Burkina Faso might supply much-needed funds for the country's nuclear weapons program or other domestic military initiatives. Furthermore, North Korea can get beyond the limitations imposed by UN sanctions by trading weapons to Africa. Even while sanctions have made it much more difficult for North Korea to trade internationally, it is still able to sell military hardware to nations that are either subject to sanctions or are prepared to resist pressure from other nations. Burkina Faso is a perfect client because of its urgent need for military support. North Korea gains strategically and economically from this arms trade, which solidifies its status as a major supplier of military hardware worldwide. This might eventually assist North Korea in negotiating comparable agreements with other nations in Asia or Africa. These provide a different market for its military exports and are similarly remote or unsatisfied with Western influence. Furthermore, North Korea's involvement with Burkina Faso is consistent with its larger geopolitical policy of extending its influence in areas where more established powers, like the United States and European countries, have been unable to establish their hegemony. Burkina Faso is situated in Africa's Sahel region, which is plagued by security issues such as insurgencies, and is increasingly becoming a focus of global power struggles. A counter-narrative to the Western presence in the area is offered by North Korea's involvement, especially from former colonial countries like France. Supporting Traore and Burkina Faso gives North Korea the chance to establish a presence in West Africa, which is home to vital resources and commercial routes. Countries like Burkina Faso may seek alternatives as the West's influence in Africa starts to decline as a result of growing disenchantment with military operations and economic alliances. And North Korea hopes to establish itself as a major actor in this change. North Korea is creating the framework for future alliances with other African nations that could also wish to break away from Western meddling by backing Burkina Faso. Beyond the obvious military advantages, Pyongyang has a great chance to test and improve its military technologies in actual battle scenarios because to North Korea's collaboration with Burkina Faso. North Korean military technologies can be used and seen in operation in the context of the continuing conflict in Burkina Faso. Whether it's the functionality of sophisticated cyber warfare tools, surveillance apparatus, or missile systems, the Sahelian conflict offers North Korea a comparatively low-risk environment in which to hone its military capabilities in real-world combat situations. In this way, the partnership between Burkina Faso and North Korea turns into a kind of experimentation, where both parties gain from the sharing of military technology, knowledge, and skills. It is obvious that North Korea is interested in this trade. The more effectively its tactics and equipment work in Burkina Faso, the more appealing it is to other countries looking for comparable military solutions. The potential to weaken Western dominance in Africa, a continent that has frequently served as a battlefield for international power battles, is another important reason for North Korea's backing of Burkina Faso. North Korea fortifies its position as a counterweight to the United States and European countries by forming an alliance with a nation that actively aims to resist Western influence. The economic, diplomatic, and North Korea's military assistance to Burkina Faso poses a threat to the Western-led world order, which frequently tries to force its political system and ideals on African countries. Pyongyang sees this collaboration as more than merely assisting an African nation with self-defense. It also aims to deliver a blow to the Western system, which has been criticizing its government for many years. By giving Burkina Faso this kind of backing, North Korea is letting the West know that it is still a force to be reckoned with, capable of forming alliances and influencing world politics in ways that go against the grain. Therefore, North Korea's assistance to Burkina Faso is not a one-sided situation. But without Western meddling, nothing occurs in Africa. Although Burkina Faso's alliance with North Korea is largely viewed as a practical step to obtain military assistance and strengthen the nation's defenses, there are serious economic and diplomatic risks associated with it. Western countries and international organizations have criticized Burkina Faso's decision to associate with one of the most isolated and divisive regimes in the world, casting doubt on the country's long-term standing in the global community. Under Ibrahim Traore's leadership, Burkina Faso faces a challenging future ahead. Despite the military and strategic advantages, the country's recent alliance with North Korea poses a number of risks and challenges that will influence Burkina Faso's future for years to come. In the face of growing insurgency, political isolation, and diplomatic pressure from the West, Burkina Faso's decision to work with one of the most ostracized regimes in the world could either usher in a new era of sovereignty and self-reliance or send the nation into even more chaos. Will Burkina Faso's independence be genuinely protected by this contentious relationship, or will it result in more intricate and hazardous entanglements? Ibrahim Traore's leadership of Burkina Faso is unwavering despite ongoing Western criticism, especially from former colonial powers and international organizations like the United Nations. Traore has a clear vision for Burkina Faso, despite the fact that many have questioned his decision to join with North Korea. He is unaffected by the demands of Western condemnation or action. According to Traore, the way to national sovereignty, security, and independence is to steer clear of the traps of conventional Western alliances and look for partnerships based on practical, shared interests. Even North Korea has taken notice of and supported his leadership, which has come to represent defiance and strategic independence. A nation with identical goals of independence and opposition to outside influence. Western nations, especially those who see Ibrahim Traore's actions as a danger to the current international order, have harshly criticized him since he came to office. The United States, the European Union, and others have condemned the resumption of diplomatic relations with North Korea in particular, viewing Pyongyang as a pariah state and a danger to international stability. These nations, who have traditionally set the parameters for African security and progress, anticipated that Burkina Faso would stay in their circle and depend on their financial, military, and humanitarian assistance. But in his pragmatic approach, Traore has decided to go in a different direction. He acknowledges that the Western-led structures that have dominated Burkina Faso's growth for many years have not been able to address the underlying issues facing the nation, particularly both economic stagnation and insurgency. Burkina Faso has made a deliberate choice to break free from the limitations of Western assistance, military operations, and political expectations by engaging with North Korea. The real objective, according to Traore, is to create a powerful, independent Burkina Faso free from outside influence, especially those with a track record of meddling and exploitation. Western countries' unrelenting criticism simply makes Traore more determined. He views diplomatic isolation and sanctions as unavoidable outcomes of opposing the West's hegemony rather than as threats. Such criticism, in his opinion, is just evidence that Burkina Faso is headed in the right direction, rejecting the status quo and pursuing a future with greater autonomy. The foundation of Traore's leadership is the idea that independence encompasses more than just political freedom. This is also about military and economic independence. His pursuit of alternative alliances, like the one with North Korea, which provides Burkina Faso with the means to defend itself and assert its sovereignty, is motivated by this vision. It is no accident that North Korea has chosen to side with Burkina Faso. It reflects the objectives that Traore and the North Korean government have in common. Similar to Burkina Faso, North Korea has traditionally rejected Western meddling and influence in favor of forging its own course, in spite of severe international sanctions and diplomatic isolation. Their alliance is based on this shared understanding. Supporting Burkina Faso is more than just giving military assistance or establishing a presence in Africa for North Korea. The goal is to strengthen a worldwide narrative of opposition to Western imperialism. North Korea identifies with Burkina Faso's struggle in many respects. Under Kim Jong-un, the country's leadership has resisted pressure from the US and other Western countries for years. North Korea is a state that is committed to maintaining its sovereignty at any costs, as seen by its isolationist policies, military buildup, and nuclear program. It was considered a logical progression of this common world view when Burkina Faso, under Traore, chose to turn away from Western influence and look for North Korea as an ally. Despite its isolation, North Korea has shown a willingness to back countries that are opposing Western hegemony in a similar way. North Korea increases its influence in a strategically significant area of the world and fortifies its relationship with a nation that shares its principles by providing military assistance to Burkina Faso. The alliance challenges the idea that African countries must submit to the demands of Western-led institutions and past colonial rulers by enabling both states to stand up to dominating Western powers. Given this, Traore's actions are not just calculated moves. Rather, they are audacious declarations of support for other countries vying for independence. Burkina Faso is now a desirable partner for North Korea because of his leadership, which has established the nation as a major actor in the worldwide war for sovereignty. By working together, both countries support the notion that opposing outside influence is a valid strategy for states looking to control their own destiny. Do you think the West ever had the best interest of Africa at heart? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change.